What's up, everyone? It is the 5th of November, 2025, and it's good to be back. My name is Derek, author and webmaster of Gematrinator.com, and after some much-needed time off, in which I had to reset my life a little bit following the disaster that took out my basement, we're back at it, talking about numerology and how events in the mainstream are connected through this code of Gematria and synchronicity. And the story we'll be focusing on today is the UPS Flight 2976 crash just outside of Muhammad Ali Airport in Louisville, Kentucky. As you can see on the thumbnail for this video, we will discuss how the 9/11 code is stamped heavily into this news story, and all of the various numerical connections to the mayor of Louisville, Craig Greenberg. So shout out to everybody who's checking this video out, whether you're live or archived. Again, it's been a little while, but it is indeed good to be back. And hopefully this will get me moving on more videos in the near future as well. Now, we're being told that 11 are dead in yesterday's fatal crash, which is interesting because for most of the day they've been talking about the number 9 as the number of deaths. And indeed, it is the 9/11 attacks that this is all a riddle for. And in order to come to this conclusion, all we have to do is look at the number in the flight for this airline that crashed yesterday, 2976. Well, that number is simply one off of the total number of people murdered in the 4 plane crashes of the 9/11 attacks all the way back in 2001. Flight 2976, 2,977 victims. Now, in this channel, we look at much more than these simple numeric connections. What I believe is the most significant cipher in Gematria, which also happens to be the only one that's not based in the current alphabetic order, called Latin Gematria, or Agrippa's Key. The phrase September 11th has Gematria of 1260. Well, yesterday, November 4th, was exactly 1,260 weeks after the terror attacks of September 11th. Now, of course, the most haunting images of the 9/11 incident came out of the city of New York. And on the same day as this plane crash, New York elected its first ever Muslim mayor. Well, that's an interesting synchronicity, considering that 19 Muslims were convicted of the September 11th attacks. And when 9/11 happened, the president was George W. Bush. And just one day before this plane crash, George Bush's vice president, Dick Cheney, died at the age of 84. And Dick Cheney wasn't just any vice president. He is commonly referred to as being the most powerful vice president in the office's history. Of course, he was an influential stockholder as well, particularly with Halliburton, which made a lot of money off of the Iraq War, which he largely orchestrated. And towards the end of this video, we'll talk about an injury in the NFL that's connected to all of this. Because, of course, one of the plane crashes on 9/11 was in Washington, D.C., where Dick Cheney lived and worked. And one day before Cheney died, there was a devastating injury to Washington's quarterback, Jaden Daniels. Now, Daniels got injured against the team from the state of Washington, the Seattle Seahawks. And even the mainstream media pointed out that there were a lot of eerie comparisons between the injury of Jaden Daniels, who brutally dislocated his elbow in this play. I mean, watch it at your own peril. Because he got hurt at the 4-yard line, and that was the same yard line that RG3 tore his ACL at during a playoff game against the Seattle Seahawks, the same team from Washington. So there's definitely a lot to unpack. And we're going to focus on this 9/11 code. And this is a code that's been brewing for several weeks. Now, although it's been over a month since I've done a video, the blog has been almost as active as ever. Had to take a little time to get myself resituated at home. But for instance, we had an actress from the show 911 Nashville pass away just like 10 days after the premiere of the show. And in this post, I talked about a lot of numerical connections to the Jesus Code. As this actress, Isabel Tate, was born on the first day of Lunation 985, which is the big Jesus number. Well, it just so happens that on that exact same day that she passed away, a former major leaguer named Jesus, or Jesus Montero, died after a traffic collision a couple of weeks earlier. Montero played most of his career for the Seattle Mariners, and just one day before the Mariners were eliminated from the American League Championship Series is when Montero died. Furthermore, a football player, a very well-accomplished player from the New York Jets named Nick Mangold died last week as well. And, of course, he played for the Jets in New York. It was Jets in the city of New York that attacked on 9/11. So, again, check out the blog for more. There's a whole lot more about this. But let's start with Zohran Mamdani, the new mayor of New York as of January next year. The first ever socialist mayor in the history of the city. And you gotta love how his name is Mamdani, and he's all about bringing in this socialist government, as if the government were your parents, like your mom and daddy. Maybe that's a stretch, but that's what I thought of when I saw his name. He is set to become the 111th mayor on January 1st, or 1/1. Remember, the 9/11 attacks happened on the date leaving 111 days in the year. In the standard alphabetic order, where A is 1 through Z as 26, New York equals 111. And of course, a number connected to Donald John Trump. We'll see how the president connects to this. But also, Cassius Marcellus Clay Jr. That's the full name of boxer Muhammad Ali. And this crash happened at Muhammad Ali International Airport. And much like Zohran Mamdani is becoming the first Muslim mayor of New York, Muhammad Ali was probably the most famous athlete to be a convert to the Islam faith. Notice how Muhammad Ali was born 11 months and 19 days after Dick Cheney. And these are, of course, the same 4 digits in the 9/11 attacks, 9/11-01. More on these digits in a little bit. Because what I want to talk about is this guy, Craig Greenberg, the mayor of Louisville, Kentucky, where the plane crash occurred. And of course, as a result, it's he who's tasked with feeding the information to the media. And the name Craig Greenberg has matching gematria with Cassius Clay as well. 236. But more important is the ordinal value of his name, Craig Greenberg, using the simplest cipher, ordinal. His name sums to 119, the same digits in the 9/11 attacks. In fact, Mayor Craig Greenberg gives us a 191, a 110 like the number of floors for both Twin Towers, and also 106. Well, this brings us back to Mamdani, who was born in the year 1991 on a date with numerology of 119. Just run the digits in his birthday. 10 plus 18 plus 91, 119. UPS, by virtue of being founded in 1907, well, that means that 2025 is the courier's 119th year of operation. But what really brings this entire story together is how this is a riddle to the 1995 Oklahoma City bombing, which was, of course, was a devastating bombing of a high-rise building, which wasn't that dissimilar from the World Trade Center bombing, which happened several years earlier. And before I get into the deep numerical connections here with all of these characters, look at how many days passed between the World Trade Center bombing and yesterday's plane crash. This is an important number, 11940. Well, here, looking at the last four digits, and actually all five digits, 194. The date September 11th sums to 194. So does the year 2001. So does the number 119. Now, this guy, Mayor Craig Greenberg, had the 9/11 in his age for the Oklahoma City bombing. Oklahoma City has matching 191 and 106 Gematria with Mayor Craig Greenberg. The man who was accused of that bombing, McVeigh, whose name equals 119 with capital letters, he was put to death 1 month and 19 days after his birthday. Well, nowadays, the city of Oklahoma City has a basketball team, and they're called the OKC Thunder, which equals 119. Also, the Oklahoma City Thunder, 1119. You may recall that last year, it was said that the tallest tower in the nation would be built in Oklahoma City, of all places, for some reason. Well, again, this is a city heavily connected to the 9/11 Tower Code. Now, look at how, on the same day as this plane crash, the Oklahoma City Thunder, the NBA's defending world champions, they're still undefeated. They scored 126 points in their win. Well, remember, this crash was exactly 1,260 weeks after September 11th, which has that value. Muhammad Ali, 1206 Sumerian, just like Timothy McVeigh. Also in the same reverse Sumerian method, Sumerian, where we multiply the alphabetic order by 6, the number most closely associated with time. Alfred P. Murrah, the name of the building that was bombed in OKC, 1260. 1 month and 26 days between the birthdays of Mamdani and Greenberg. Also notice how Craig Greenberg and Zoran Mamdani have matching 331 Gematria with Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. This is another number important to the 9/11 attacks because the memorials at the Pentagon and the World Trade Center are separated by exactly 331 kilometers. Now, 331 is a number connected to the eclipse code. And this story is definitely connected to the two total solar eclipses that passed over the United States in the past decade. Yesterday's crash was 575 days after the second eclipse, which is the Latin value of Alfred P. Murrah. So this is one of those decodes I can't totally explain quite yet. Perhaps there's going to be a future bombing that's connected to this. Or that New York will literally explode after the election of this socialist. But what this definitely ties to is Freemasonry as well. Now, in modern Freemasonry, it's believed that the 33rd degree is the highest. Of course, in Pythagorean, 33 is the value of Masonry. And there's something symbolic about this number, because at 33 degrees is the melting point of water. So from 32 degrees, it turns from a solid to a liquid. And these two numbers are heavily coded into the plane crash. We start again with Craig Greenberg, who was born on the date leaving 131 days in the year, Louisville Muhammad Ali Airport, and Flight 2976, both with this value. Well, 131 is the 32nd prime number. Yesterday's crash was exactly 3,002 weeks after the birth of Timothy McVeigh and 30 years, 200 days after the Oklahoma City bombing. McVeigh was executed 32 days before UPS Airlines' anniversary, by the way. And this all connects to his name, McVeigh, which equals 32. McVeigh was executed 320 weeks after the bomb he was convicted for. The word bomb equals 32, like the word circle. Don't forget the emblem of the Jesuit order is a circle and contains 32 rays of the sun. This emblem very similar to an eclipsed sun. But this number 32 is further coded into the number 1967 using standard English Gematria, a cipher which is very similar to the Latin method, but uses the current 26-letter alphabet. 1967. Well, look at how old Mayor Greenberg was yesterday. 19,067 years old. 1967 is the year that the investigating party, the NTSB, was founded, tasked with investigating the crash. Now, the Oklahoma City Thunder used to be known as the Seattle Supersonics. And the Supersonics were founded in the year 1967, their very first season. Well, in that same standard cipher, Louisville Muhammad Ali Airport, without the international. Look at this, 1967, Louisville Muhammad Ali Airport. But also notice the ordinal value, 329. This is the current mercurial age of President Donald Trump. And if you follow my work, you know that Donald Trump and Mercury have been heavily synced to plane crashes, not just this year, but throughout history. In fact, last year, on December 18th, which is Jaden Daniels' birthday, by the way, we had a plane crash at the home of a Buffalo Bills player. Or I think that was on the 19th. And that was Trump's mercurial birthday. On Trump's most recent mercurial birthday, it was September 10th. That was the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And in reverse, ritual human sacrifice gives us that 329. But also look at Flight 2976. When you spell this out, it equals 329 in reverse. Just like the name Timothy James McVeigh, 329 with capital letters. But also check out how the number 33 is important to all of this as well. Now, just last month, incumbent New York mayor, or incoming New York mayor, Zohran Mamdani, was 33 years of age. And in Sumerian, his name equals 330. Remember the Twin Towers, destroyed 33 years after construction started. New York equals 33, while New York City is 333. The birth names of Muhammad Ali equal 330 and 33. Yesterday's crash in Louisville was a span of 33 days before Donald Trump turns 330 mercurial years old. Mercury, the god of transportation, which of course an airplane is part of. Timothy McVeigh was executed at the age of 33. And notice how Zohran Mamdani sums to the 33rd prime number using the alphabetic order. 137. And 137, that was also the date numerology of the Oklahoma City bombing. Now, when you write out the number 33, one of the Gematria values you can get is 114. And think about the date of yesterday's crash, November 4th or 11/4. Mamdani's full name, Zohran Kwame Mamdani, sums to 1140 in Sumerian. And when Craig Greenberg became the mayor of Louisville, Mamdani was 11,400 days old. President of the United States and Trump also sum to 114. Trump has a Trump Tower in New York City, which is all part of the Tower Code, as I've discussed. The Tower equals 114, while the Tower 16 equals 1014. Donald Trump was 1,140 weeks old when Timothy McVeigh was born. And McVeigh was not only born on a date with 114 numerology, but also the 114th day of the year. And of course, riddles with the Oklahoma City bombing, the September 11th attacks, and the sort, they all go back to the tarot decks and the Tower, the 16th card. Interesting, we just had number 16 hit the walk-off, or not the walk-off, but the game-winning home run in the World Series the other day. So yeah, a lot of 32 here, a lot of 33. Another 32 worth pointing out is that the World Trade Center bombing was 32 years ago. So again, I don't know exactly what this decode is pointing to with this whole bomb riddle, but through my experience, maybe there will be some kind of bomb attack in New York or nearby during Mamdani's term is kind of what I'm getting from this. So one more part of this post, and we're again talking about Freemasonry. Now, the Scottish rite of Freemasonry traces back to the Premier Grand Lodge of England, which is currently 308 years old. Scottish rite of Freemasonry equals 308 in Latin. Well, yesterday's plane crash was on the 308th day of the year. And also in Latin, the phrase plane crash equals 308. Also, 97 in ordinal. And remember, this is the 25th prime number, which explains why there's been so many plane crashes here in the year 25. UPS equals 25, so does Trump. But if you take the digits in the year 2025, these numbers also connect to Timothy McVeigh, whose full name equals 225 in ordinal. The Unabomber, born on 22/5. Ted Kaczynski, once accused of bombing an airplane. The current director or chairwoman of the National Transportation Safety Board, Jennifer Homendy. Notice how she was sworn into office on the 225th day of the year, which was 220 weeks and 5 days before the crash. But look at this woman's age on November 4th, just yesterday. She was a span of 19,703 days old. Well, how many times have we talked about this number? 1973, which is the year that the World Trade Center first opened. 1973 is also the Latin value of the number 973. And it was Brown Lunation 973 when the Twin Towers were destroyed. Well, 973 is the standard gematria of the city of Louisville. And look at what year the mayor of Louisville was born. 1973. He was born on August 22nd or 8/22. This woman's full name, Jennifer Lynn Homendy, sums to 1822. 8/22, also the value of Oklahoma City bombing. And Zohran Mamdani has that 822 to match Greenberg's birthday. So again, all of these mayors that are installed all over the nation, I would imagine a lot of them are legitimately elected because, it's these parties who control who even gets put on the ballot in the first place. But I hope this helps explain why some of these characters are placed where they are. I mean, here you have Craig Greenberg from New York. Well, of course he's from New York. I should have pointed that out earlier. But if he was born in New York, I guess he did move to Louisville early. But so many of these people, transfer at a young age. And my theory is that these people's parents are involved in Freemasonry or some other secret society that determines that their son will be in power in the future. Just one of my wacky theories. I don't know if there's any truth to it. But based on how well the numbers line up with all these events, it seems to be what's going on. So to wrap this part up, I want to talk about the pi code and how that's another big part of all of this. Now, when you take the 3 digits of pi, 314, and transpose them and add them all together, we find out that the 6 different combinations of these digits sum to 1776. On top of that, 1776 is also the sum of 888 plus 888. And in Latin, 888 is the gematria of 3.14. Zohran Kwame Mamdani has matching 1776 gematria with Star Spangled Banner. And he was 1,776 weeks old when he was elected. But you can't talk about the math of the circle without the number 322. Mayor Craig Greenberg equals 322 in reverse, matching collapse of the World Trade Center and the World Trade Center. Now, in the collapse of the World Trade Center, 343 firefighters were killed. Well, with prime numbers, the name Craig Greenberg equals 343. This number is the product of 7 times 7 times 7. Oklahoma equals 777. And look at how old Craig Greenberg was when UPS Airlines was founded. 777 weeks exactly. Well, in the alphabetic order, 777 is the first number with gematria of 314. And this is important because the book Life of Pi was first published on 9/11/2001. So with any 9/11 riddle, we also see the digits of pi. And on this same date, right, when Craig Greenberg was 777 weeks old, Zohran Mamdani was exactly 3 years and 14 weeks old. And again, 314 is the ordinal gematria of 777. Cassius Marcellus Clay, Muhammad Ali's birth name, 314 and 1946. Well, UPS Airlines is now 1946 weeks old. This is similar to the birth year of Donald Trump, 1946. And if Craig Greenberg was born just one day earlier, it would have been 1946 days after Timothy McVeigh was born. Now, 1946 is a composite number that connects to 666. Check out my blog post linked below if you want to see more. There's always more connections than I am able to cover with just one video. Because next up, I want to talk about the death of Dick Cheney. Now, I'm not going to look at everything in this post, but this was definitely a skull and bones riddle. And of course, Dick Cheney served under President George W. Bush, who, just like his father, George H.W. Bush, was a graduate of Yale University. Here we see Papa Bush with the same alma mater. And both of them were members of the Skull and Bone Society. In fact, Dick Cheney also attended Yale University. And just look at this guy's birthday, Dick Cheney. 130 of 41. Skull and Bones is 130. While Skull and Bones is 41. His death at 84 also reflects this code. Both Skull and Crossbones and Skull and Bones sum to 840 in Gematria. But 84 is also a number connected to solar eclipses. Dick Cheney died exactly 1 year and 30 weeks after the second Great American Total Eclipse. Total Eclipse 130 in Latin, syncing up with his 130 birthday. George W. Bush, the president at the time, 130. Human sacrifice 130. Also, the 13th prime number is 41 to match his birth year. The 9/11 attacks that happened under his watch were on a date with 41 numerology. And just like the plane crash yesterday, Dick's death fell 1,260 weeks after September 11th, which equals 1260. But notice how his first name, Dick, also equals 1260. Dick died 2,530 days after Papa Bush. Dick and Bush. Remember, Bush defeated Dukakis. Who's got the cock in his name? Dukakis was married to a woman named Kitty. I mean, this stuff is hilarious. Anyway, George Herbert Walker Bush equals 253 to match the number of days between their deaths. But what I really wanted to focus on was this guy, Harry Whittington. Who was Harry Whittington, you may be asking? Well, back in 2006, Dick Cheney was on a hunting trip in Texas when he allegedly accidentally shot this man. And Whittington survived the incident and lived all the way until 2023. But this was one of the most bizarre stories to come out of the White House in a long time. And as it turns out, Dick Cheney's death is heavily synced to Harry Whittington. Of course, Whittington dead in the year 2023. Like skull and crossbones equals 223. Now, the shooting occurred near Corpus Christi, Texas, and was first reported to the media in Corpus Christi. Now, Corpus Christi is body of Christ. Of course, a lot of Christians believe Jesus died in the year 33 at the age of 33, like crucifixion of Jesus Christ and Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, both 303 in ordinal. Well, Dick Cheney was the 46th vice president of the United States. And if you measure from the 46th president's birthday to the death of Dick Cheney, you get 30,300 days. Cheney died a span of exactly 33 months after Harry Whittington, whom he shot during that hunting trip. And in reduction, the name Cheney equals 33. The man he shot was even born on 3/3, or March 3rd. And when he died, there were 330 days left in the year. Whittington was even 13 years and 333 days of age when Cheney was born. 33, the sum of both eclipse and circles. Dick Cheney dead 33 weeks and 3 days after the eclipse on Pi Day, or March 14th. Pi and circles all intertwined. But I also want to look at how this is connected to the current Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance. Now, J.D. Vance was born in the year 1984. And this is an interesting number because Dick Cheney was born 1,984 days before George Bush. So isn't that interesting? The president and vice president during the 9/11 attacks born 1,984 days apart. And it was their administration that gave birth to the Department of Homeland Security, which enabled Orwellian surveillance of the American population. Orwellian, of course, referring to George Orwell, the author of the book 1984, where Big Brother essentially takes over American life. And you have to appreciate the gematria of 1984, 1109, a lot like the digits in September 11th. The Jewish holiday Tisha B'Av, celebrated on the 9th day of the 11th month of the civil calendar, commemorates the destruction of the two temples. And Tisha B'Av has the 9/11 as well. Well, notice how J.D. Vance was born on August 2nd, or 8/2. And yeah, J.D. Vance also a graduate of Yale University. I don't know if he's a confirmed bonesman, but I'd be willing to bet he was tapped at some point by someone. Cheney died exactly 82 weeks after the American eclipse, which was exactly 82 lunar phases after the first, matching Vance's 8-2 birthday. But these numbers are solidified through 59. Dick Cheney died 277 days after his birthday. That's the 59th prime number. And the date of his death had primary numerology of 59. The current vice president, J.D. Vance, his name equals 59 in ordinal. Skull and Bones equals 59, no matter how you write it out. Remember, he had that big accident with the shotgun. Accident equals 59. The word kill also equals 59. And that's also the 17th prime number. Kill, 59 and 17. Richard Bruce Cheney, 170. Similar to George Bush, 107, both ordinal. The name Dick Cheney equals the 93rd prime number. He was born in Lincoln, Nebraska, which equals 93. And he died 93 days after Vance's 41st birthday. Well, Vance had also been the vice president for exactly 41 weeks. Hearkening again back to the Skull and Bones Code. And the last thing I want to touch on before we talk about Jaden Daniels for a minute is once again the Pi Code. Now, we mentioned earlier, Pi and 9/11 entwined forever through this famous book, which was turned into a Hollywood film. The first 3 digits of pi can be achieved by dividing 22 by 7. And in the alphabetic order, 22 divided by 7 is also 314. Dick Cheney died 2 months and 27 days after his birthday. Now, before I forget, I should point out that, Cheney died on November 3rd, which was the 11th anniversary of the opening of the new One World Trade Center. And the original World Trade Center in the shape of an 11. So that's one of those simple things that are so simple I miss them because I'm digging too deep. But anyways, back to Pi. In the book Life of Pi, the main character survives for 227 days on the shipwreck. Dick Cheney dead 2 months and 27 days after his birthday, matching the name Dick in square numbers. Dick was exactly 2,270 weeks old when J.D. Vance was born. Cheney died 272 days before Vance's next birthday. And in reverse, James David Vance equals 272. And the number 272 is really important to the moon, which is 0.272 times the diameter of the Earth. Harry Whittington died 272 lunar phases, or moons, after Dick Cheney took office. And Cheney died 2 years and 272 days later, during Brown lunation number 1272. In fact, his death was also 1 year, 272 days, before the total solar eclipse in the year 2027, which, of course, also has a 227 in it. The Hebrew phrase for total eclipse equals 227. And when Harry Whittington died, in 2023, it was exactly 227 sidereal months or lunar orbits after he was shot by Dick Cheney. Again, here we're looking at the measurements of the moon, a lunar phase, a synodic month, or a lunar orbit, also called a sidereal month. Don't forget the 9/11 attacks happened 7 months and 22 days after Cheney took office. And when you write out September the 11th, it equals 227 and the 227th prime number. And who died as a result of the Iraq War? Saddam Hussein, whose name equals 272 and 722. Saddam Hussein, the man who died as a result of the invasion into Iraq, which essentially was blamed for September 11th. And it was Dick Cheney who shamelessly claimed this, despite having no real evidence, claiming that they had weapons of mass destruction. Oh, let's just go to Iraq and install a new regime there. Well, of course, Iraq is modern-day Babylon. Babylon, now in Iraq. And the holiday Tisha B'Av, the day of fasting for the Jews, commemorating the destruction of the temple, which was destroyed by the Babylonians, responsible for the destruction of Solomon's temple. So that's the only reason we went to Iraq, was because of the Babylonian Tower riddle, not because they were actually a threat to our freedom. So, with all that out of the way, we're talking about J.D. Vance, the vice president who lives in Washington. Well, once again, one day before Dick Cheney died, another J.D. from Washington, Jaden Daniels, the quarterback of the Washington Commanders, busted his arm in a vicious injury. I mean, we've seen it happen a lot with legs, where someone's leg gets caught underneath them and their leg snaps. But very rarely do you see it with an arm. And this one was just brutal, man. His arm just bent the wrong way. Oof, not fun to watch. That's not to say I didn't watch it like a dozen times. I definitely did. But I'm a sicko. And that's just how it is. You got to live with it. Now, notice how Jaden Daniels was born between the election of Dick Cheney and the date he was sworn in. Dick Cheney took office 33 days after Jaden Daniels was born. And remember, 33 was a huge number in all of these decodes we're looking at today. Daniel's injury occurred on a date with numerology of 58, which is the value of Washington, with the S exception. Washington also sums to 985 in standard. And look at how old Jaden Daniels was when he busted his arm. 9,085 days old. The number 985 is heavily synced to the number 116. Now, first of all, 9,085 equals 116. But when you write out 116, it equals 985. And this all goes back to the biblical code of Jesus. The name Jesus equals 985. Again, as I mentioned earlier, we just had an athlete named Jesus, or Jesus, die on the same date as an actress from the show 911 Nashville. A lot of people believe that Jesus was born on September 11th, and September 11th is an upside-down 116. Jaden's injury occurred after he was tackled by a player named Drake Thomas of the Seattle Seahawks. Notice how the name Drake Thomas equals 911, the upside down 116. Robert Griffin III, a former Washington quarterback who also suffered a devastating injury after his rookie year. RG3 was 10 years, 1 week, and 6 days old when Thomas was born, and 10 years, 10 months, and 6 days old when Daniels was born. Daniels' injury occurred 10 months and 16 days after his last birthday and 1 month and 16 days before his next birthday. He was even drafted into the NFL on the 116th day of a leap year. And his injury occurred 1 year, 191 days later. This injury was also exactly 43 weeks after the date of RG3's injury, which occurred at the same yard line of the same stadium. RG3 born on the 43rd day of the year. RG3 equals 43. So does Seattle Seahawks, the team that both of these quarterbacks were playing against. Drake Thomas equals 43. RG3 had a torn ACL, which equals 43, just like the word football. Now, the connection I just forgot to make was this. Back in the year 2018, we had basically the exact same fucking thing happen. On November 18th of 2018, Alex Smith suffered a broken leg at the 41-yard line. Exactly 33 years earlier, Washington quarterback Joe Theismann suffered a broken leg at the 41-yard line. So I did a huge post on this because these two games with the leg injuries both ended with the same final score, 23-21. So what are the odds that, these two quarterbacks get injured at the same yard line? They were born, or these injuries occurred exactly 33 years apart. And now we get this quarterback who was born 33 days before Dick Cheney became the vice president, gets hurt on the same yard line as another Washington quarterback. I mean, I don't know what the odds of this are, but it's absurd. Now, what I figured out in this post is that it's all connected to the Pi Day lunar eclipse. Jaden Daniels was born on 12/18. And he was 1,218 weeks old when he was drafted. He was 12 years and 18 days old just 1 day before RG3's injury, which occurred at the same stadium, Northwest Stadium, which equals 12/18. Total lunar eclipse equals 12/18. And RG3's injury was 4,450 days before the Pi Day lunar eclipse this year. Well, 445 is the Hebrew value of total lunar eclipse. That eclipse on Pi Day belonged to Saros series 123, matching the word pi. Well, now Jaden Daniels gets injured. His name equals 123. And his injury occurred 12 years, 300 days after RG3's. And Griffin III was born on a date with numerology of 123. To finally end this video, guys, I want to also talk about how the number 13 was coded into this story. Jaden Daniels got hurt 233 days after the Pi Day lunar eclipse. When you write out the number 13, you get Gematria of 233, but more important is that the number 233 is the 13th Fibonacci number. When RG3 got hurt, it was in the year 13, and it was the 6th day of the year. Well, 13 is the 6th prime number. These two quarterbacks were born 130 months apart. Washington equals 130, while Jaden equals 103. Jaden was born on the date leaving 13 days in the calendar. And not only was he drafted 130 days after his birthday, but it was also 10 weeks and 3 days after Griffin III's birthday. Then, Jaden Daniels got hurt on a date with numerology of 13. The planet Mercury equals 103. And it does seem like Mercury has a lot to do with injuries, as Mercury is the god of luck. In fact, earlier this year, I did a post about Jaden Ivey got hurt by the mercurial code. So I did this video in January. It talks about how Mercury was coded into this injury of a man named Jaden. I didn't even think of this. This guy's name is also Jaden. And he was 103 mercurial years old, matching Mercury. He was also 1 month and 17 days before his next birthday. And 117 is the value of quarterback, Jaden, Redskins, and 13. Now, if you take 13 squared, you get a product of 169. And the name Daniels equals 169. Well, Daniels got hurt 1 year, 6 months, 9 days after being drafted. And it was against the Seattle Seahawks, which equals 169. But there's more. The number 13 equals 347. RG3 got hurt 347 days before Jaden's birthday. And RG3 was 13,047 days old for Daniel's injury. And the numbers in Daniel's age are also found in the Gematria of 33. So this just goes on and on, guys. I'm already getting tired of talking about this, but it all connects to the moon through the number 83. The Gematria of the moon is coded into their lunar ages. I mean, it just goes on. And it's so undeniable that the moon is this governing satellite of the human experience we have on Earth. It goes so much deeper than conspiracy, guys. I'm so tired of blaming people and blaming secret societies when the truth is that these secret societies just figured out the numbers of reality. The numbers that are governing our lives. There's a code to this. There's numbers that work together. Numbers of birth, numbers of life. And they're all exhibited through the gematria of the words we speak. I don't know how to better articulate it other than to simply show you the numerical evidence in all of these major news stories that occur. And again, you may be, wondering, well, you're so fluent in this language, how come you don't do videos on all the posts and everything? And, to be honest, for the first time truly since I started doing this work, I felt a little averse about talking about this. And it really does have a lot to do with what happened to me personally and the disaster in Milwaukee that destroyed my basement and forced the rebuilding of my home. I really thought that this was a great stopping point, or at least an end to this chapter. Because what are the odds that I came as close to predicting the disaster that destroyed my house as a human could possibly come? It was kind of the culmination of all my research, is that, gematria, numerology, synchronicity, this shit just isn't about looking at, the forthcoming sports game this weekend and picking a winner because this team has more numbers that align than this one. But If I'm wrong, it's because I missed these numbers that also align with the other team. It's so much fucking more than that. This is a deep dive into your own personal spirituality and your own connection to the greater being that is the human mass consciousness. So, no, I don't look at sports that often. I mean, sometimes I still do and get a game right, but that's not what this is about. You know, all those people who claim to pick sports games correctly, how many of them are also picking up on the riddles for major disasters before they happen? So, you know, when this happened, I was just like, I don't know what else I can do to prove that we live in a mathematical matrix, that all human beings are connected on a deeper level that no one truly understands because we are not coded with the capacity to really get it. But the way in which the world manifests essentially proves that we are one giant organism working together. So, you know, after this happened, I got a lot of views on my Charlie Kirk video, which was great. Numerology and Gematria got really popular for a short time again after this happened. And, you know, it always sucks when bad things occur and a lot of people are stuck in division, but it did help a lot of people wake up to what's happening in our country and in our world. But me personally, I found myself very discouraged upon seeing the social discourse in the aftermath of the Charlie Kirk event, which I'll admit fooled me to a large extent as well. You know, after it happened, I wasn't aware of how orchestrated everything was, and I said some things I probably shouldn't have in regards to it. It doesn't really matter. It was nothing horrible. I didn't tell anybody what to believe or what to think. But after like a week or two, I realized I was completely tricked by this whole thing. And, you know, so I went online on social media for the first time in years, try and waking people up to this numerology that the occult is attributing in all of their incidents. And all I see on there is just hatred and division, and it came from both sides. Obviously, one side has a little more vitriol than the other. But just the division that a story like this could cause was really discouraging and made me question if the work I was doing really had any effect at all, given that 9 years later, so many people are still wrapped up in this ridiculous mainstream news loop and just can't pull themselves out of it. But what I realized is that you cannot wake people up who don't even understand they're dreaming. And a part of me just wanted to stop and give up because, again, after essentially predicting the disaster that took out my basement, and then all of the undeniable numeric, symbolic, and just straight up obvious connections all the way through a movie in Hollywood, which essentially used the same script as the assassination, I just felt like it was a time to take a break and say, you know what? I can't do any more than what I'm doing. And part of not doing videos since then has been because, like, well, what's the point? You know, if I'm not picking up on some future riddle or some synchronicity that's going to point to a future event, then what am I even doing? And yeah, I mean, this is the kind of thing that happens when you start studying numerology for 10 years, is that I don't want to say you get too good, but you just gain the ability to pick up on things that seem supernatural to many, and I think are to a large extent. But just the fact that we as humans are able to tap into that ability is what's truly phenomenal. The fact that this part of reality even exists in the first place is what continues to fascinate me, and quite frankly always will. So I'll never completely finish doing these videos and talking about this because, again, it's endlessly fascinating, even if I don't feel like I have the motivation to put my voice behind the work at all times. But to me, you know, in my heart, in my soul, I'm a writer more than I am a speaker. At least that's what I think. So that's why, even though it's been a couple months since I've done a video, I have something like 40 blog posts since then. So if you don't have my blog bookmarked, definitely go ahead and do that. If you're ever hungry for numerology content, there's no shortage of it here. We're up over 3,600 posts now since 2017. The first couple years, I wouldn't call them very good posts, but over the last couple years, we've really sharpened everything up and provided a consistency which I don't think has been seen anywhere on the internet since the calculator went online back in 2017. So to all of you who made it this far into the video to listen to my personal nonsense, please do feel free to like, share, subscribe. As, at least to some degree, those do still help the videos. I mean, my stream on Charlie Kirk actually picked up on the algorithm, which was a pleasant change of pace, since YouTube has done a lot to squash channels like mine. So it's good to see myself and many others, in fact, get more traction than myself. Again, we're all working towards human enlightenment. And it's not the most fruitful, it's not the most profitable, but I think it is one of the most honorable things out there. And, yeah. Thanks again. Especially to everybody out in the chat. Like someone asking, how about predicting? I just told you. Watch my video on personal disaster and see how I was picking up on a Milwaukee flood riddle before the flood in Milwaukee that destroyed my basement. Again, this isn't picking like one of 4 sports teams. This is picking up on riddles of future events that will occur. It's far beyond what most other people are doing. So, with that, thanks to everybody once again. Peace, love, God bless. We'll talk to you all next time. See ya.